Good evening, councillors. I declare the opening of the members' briefing session at 6 p.m. This meeting today is being held on Whadjuk Noongar Budja, and I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to elders past, present and future. I thank all past and present members of the community that have supported the city to better understand and value Noongar culture within the city of Wanneroo. Please note that the audio-visual proceedings of tonight's meeting will be live broadcast online, with the exception of matters discussed behind closed doors. The broadcast of the proceedings of the meeting can be accessed live and on demand through the City of Wanneroo YouTube channel. Attendances are as per the record. We've had apologies from Councillor Civic, Councillor Miles and Councillor Baker, and Councillor Berry is on a leave of absence. Are there any other apologies? Okay. Deputations, the rules of deputations. Deputations are to be presented during the briefing session at item 3 of the order of business. Deputations must relate to a report on the current briefing session agenda. A deputation is not to exceed 3 speakers in number, and only those speakers may address the council members. Speakers of a deputation will collectively have a maximum of up to 10 minutes, dependent on the number of deputations received, to address the council members, unless an extension of time is granted. A deputation is to be in the form of a statement, and no debate or discussion on the matter is to occur. Questions from council members relating to the subject matter should be reserved until the administration has presented on the relevant report during the meeting. However, a point of clarification by a council member on a specific statement may be permitted. There is an opportunity for public question time for members of the public at item 7 in the order of business. And so we have a deputation here from Carmen Ratta on item 4.6. If you would like to take the podium and give us your name and suburb you live in and present your deputation. Thank you, Ms Ratta. If you just, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. I would like to come and talk to you all tonight just about the BMX track at, I'm from Quinns Rocks, former Koi Place, and I live opposite the BMX park. I've been living there for about 10 years now. When you first move into a home opposite a park, it looks lovely, and of course it's always very quiet on the day that you buy it. The park is lovely and it serves a good purpose, but when you come to live there, you learn about the dynamics, and it's often more than just a BMX park. It's very close to our housing, and most of the homeowners have had to buy shutters, and I've got double glazed windows, which do nothing. I think the main concern with it being there is just the dynamics of the land. The aerodynamics and the sound just is quite crazy. Even this afternoon, just right opposite the park, there's a home with kids screaming and shouting, and I can hear that right throughout my house, just for the nature of how we are in a little bit of a valley. And the park seems to be on a little bit of a rise. So you can put in double glazed windows and shutters, and that noise will just go over the top. The land also is on rock, so it's got some sort of echo. So it's just a very noisy location just by the nature of the land itself before you even put the BMX track on there. So the main thing is, what we don't enjoy about it is the noise that comes from it, and also the dust. The dust, it's a high wind area. If you even just look at the way the trees are, they're all blowing this way. So the dust just will blow off that park. Even with it demolished at the moment, we were getting a lot of dust just blowing until they sprayed it down. So it's a high wind area, as well as just being aerodynamically, I don't think that's quite the right word, that's for aeroplanes. Whatever sound is, it's just quite a loud location. Motorbikes come at night time. They come the minute it's redone. They came the second night after the last redevelopment, even before the jumps had even set. The motorbikes were there. They were very excited. They came for a couple of nights straight away. If we phone the rangers, they tell us that we need to phone the police, and it's not something you really want to get on the phone to the police about, but maybe that's what we need to do. The rangers will say to us, by the time they get there, they've gone, so it's no good. So we can't phone the rangers for assistance. Even when they're dodgy people in the park, we can't phone the rangers for assistance. They just tell us that there's nothing they can do and we need to phone the police. So yeah, the motorbikes come. It's also become like a little quad bike learning centre. People will bring the quad bikes there, and that's where they like to teach the children how to start on the little small quad bikes. That's all good and well, nice and fun, but there are better places to do it than a residential park. We've got a lot of dog walkers. As soon as the quad bikes come, you can't walk your dog. I've been walking my dog. A kid doesn't have that perception yet. They see dog and they aim for the dog. So I've had to leave the park when the quad bikes are there with my dog. It also attracts remote control cars, and we're not talking just little remote control cars. This is proper remote control cars by people who, that's their passion. So they'll come and they'll do the remote control cars around, stirring up the dust. We had one gentleman who absolutely loved it. He stirred up so much dust, he evacuated the whole park. He was also of the nature that if you spoke to him, he would just make it do more damage. So it's not always easy to approach people. They don't understand what you're living with. They're there for 5 minutes. We have to endure it over the whole year. The best time is winter when it's raining. School PE groups come during the day, and that's now become like part of the PE curriculum. They come with their bikes and they'll ride and shout and scream and cheer. So it's also like living next door to a school now sometimes during the day. There are no parking facilities, so they park up along the edge of the park. So if the kids don't like the jumps, they'll just rearrange them, so they get their shovels and they dig them up. They're quite a creative bunch of kids in the neighbourhood. When we think of kids playing, it's lovely to hear kids having fun, having a good time, but there's also another side of kids where you can get some pretty foul language being yelled from the top of those jumps. You can also get destructive kids. So, you know, we're dealing with all sides of the coin here. You've got your, kids who love to come and play and you love to watch them having fun. Some of the jumps are too big. It used to be like a little BMX track for toddlers learning. Then we sort of got a more medium-sized jump. Kids were injuring themselves within the first 5 minutes. That's probably, even the school kids coming on there with the PE class, within 5 minutes someone's winded themselves on that big jump. So it needs to be either established that you're going to have like a proper BMX track for all ages, or you need to just keep it for the toddlers. At the moment, they love the scooters. They're having a great time just going around the pathway that's around what's left while it's been demolished. Scooters seem to be the rage now. So maybe we just need to keep it as a scooting track. Anyway, there's no lighting. At night time, like any park, you'll get your adolescents who'll pass through. Unfortunately, not this New Year's Eve, but last New Year's Eve, we had a hanging in the park. So we've lived with 3 drug houses in that area, so we're quite used to sinister screaming coming from that park. This night we thought we better have a look, but there's no lighting. You take a big risk going out into that park when you hear something that you think you need to check out. I had to go back to my house and actually reverse my car out of the garage and turn the lights into the park so we could help this gentleman until the ambulance came. So there needs to be some sort of security lighting. I mean, we don't want it lit up at night. That attracts people in itself, but sometimes, when a place like that does bring people to it because it's a hangout joint. Yeah. We also get your dial-a-drug deals happening there. It's a location, easy to say, let's go to the BMX park, I'll meet you there. I've recorded many drug deals happening in that park. They just can hang out there and look like nothing's going on, but it's very easy to notice what's going on. Anyway, so yeah, those are just some of my concerns. Main thing is, if it's to go ahead, it would be nice to have some sort of sound barrier around it, maybe not let the motorbikes in, the quad bikes. If we could spray it down, the sprinklers are on. I've spoken to the groundsman. I said, can't you just aim one of those nighttime sprinklers on it just to wet it down a little bit at nighttime? I know on a 35-degree day that's going to last 2 minutes, but at least you're wetting down the dust. You're not creating such a dust storm. So yeah, there's just a few measures that if it has to go ahead and that's the location for it, we would just like some safety measures put in place just to help us out while we live with it.
Thank you, Ms. Rutter. Yeah, I understand. Listen, just a few things. You've had a look at the report for tonight, and the report says that we are going to do community consultation to households within 400 metres, I think, of the radius of McCoy Park. So that will be the opportunity for the community to put in their opinions. The other thing is, obviously, it's the noise problem and the dust issue that's the issue. Yeah. And that will be addressed probably in the community consultation and addressed in the report back from that. As far as the drug deals are concerned and the bad behaviour, Ms. Terrelink, is it possible we can look at having putting that on the list for the site CCTV there just for a period of time and liaise with the local police, and also if you can give us the times when most of the youth are there, maybe we can engage our youth services team there as well. Ms. Terrelink, is that possible?
Through you, Mayor, yes, we certainly do have a list of locations for our mobile CCTV capacity. That's also discussed with our Community Safety Working Group and also with local police to understand the priorities, but certainly we could add McCoy Park to that list.
Thank you.
Are you happy with that? We will continue to listen to what the community is saying, and then we will work through with that, but we hear what you're saying.
Oh, thank you very much. That's all we want to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in this evening.
Thank you, despite the nerves.
It's all right. Everybody has nerves when they speak. We were supposed to have another deputation. Is he here yet?
Somebody that come in at the bottom, but Mr. Zygar did contact me and he asked if his GPS said he'll be here at 6:15, so he should be in here at 6:20. So is there any possibility that we could wait for him, go on with the agenda, and when he comes in, just let him do his deputation? Is there any possibility?
He can ask public questions at the end of the meeting, item 7, so he can be here for that. Okay?
Okay.
Do it then. Thank you. Oh, is he here?
He's here.
Mark Zagar, come in and take the podium, please, and give us your name and the suburb where you live, please. It's ready for you right now.
My name's Mark Zagar at Gibbs Road, Nowgup. Sorry, just been working. Sorry we had late notice of this meeting. A lot of people send their apologies, and there'll be more people next week. Just making a deputation. Sorry, shall I continue? Yes. Thank you. Just making a deputation in regards to the local planning scheme. In a nutshell, we thank the city's efforts to advocate strongly for stopping the water cuts. The government has announced cuts of 10% with no guarantee of any further cuts in future to Nowgup, Neerabup, Carrabuta. A lot of there, just so that you understand in a broad sense, there are small farms and large farms there. There are small legacy farms that were carved up in the 1950s and 60s, some of them typically 10 to 30 acres. And then there are large farms to the east where the geography is much flatter. That's where you have, Montes, Tedesco, Banara, Neves, etc. So there are large farms and small farms. The small farms will become unviable with any cut in water. I ask you, if 10% of the foundation of your job, of your business, was cut, that would equate to at least 20 to 30% of your income. On top of that, your property will lose value as well. Who will buy a farm that is unviable? Would you? So imagine the impact on your life if 20 to 30% of your income was cut and up to 50% of the value of your property. So that's what we're facing. And I commend the City of Wanneroo in fighting the cuts. They're not proposed, they are announced. But we have been fighting this, as you know, for many years. I wish the city luck, but we also need a plan B. And that is a sensible planning solution. If your land is zoned rural, but you're having your water cut, it's logical and true that your farm is not appropriately zoned. Now, the small legacy farms easily contain the 10%, which is 1 gigalitre, that the Department of Environment, Water and Regulation seek. So logically, and I do have proof from DEWA, that if you allow sensible planning rezoning for the land containing 10% of the water, the remaining farms lose 0% of their water. It's a win-win solution. It's a historically proven solution. The City of Wanneroo has had several rezoning changes over the last 60 years. Our family has been in Nowgup since 1967. We've worked extremely hard. We're just self-employed, basically, as are many of these legacy farmers, migrants who came here in the 1950s and 60s when the freeway ended at Osborne Park. We've worked extremely hard for many years, and we do not deserve to go broke and be left for dead on the side of the curb. A sensible planning solution is a win-win solution for the City of Wanneroo because it will increase land value across the board. The remaining larger farms will retain 100% of their water allocations, and there is capacity to actually increase their allocation depending on how you rezone the farms containing 10% or more. What that does, obviously, economies of scale are very important in reducing the price of food. That's why the small farms are no longer competitive and no longer viable as well. So it's just common sense, and it has been recommended by the West Australian Planning Commission in their 2007 report, The Future of Network City Water and Land Use. I've got the report there. I'll email you all later if you want to have a bit of reading. I'm happy to do that. It just makes logical sense. So we commend the City of Wanneroo to fight to stop the water cuts that have been announced by the state government, but equally, the City of Wanneroo should advocate for sensible planning solution. Why not advocate for both options? Why not have a plan B if plan A fails? And that's it in a nutshell, and that's all we ask, is that the city advocate for both solutions to the problem, not just one. And I'm very open to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr Zagar. Would the Acting Director of Planning, Mr Piggott, like to respond to that, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr Zagar, thank you for your deputation tonight. As you did mention, the city, I guess, has an understanding that the state government's decision to reduce the water allocations by 10% is strictly not a land use planning matter. But however, we will be continuing to advocate for the retention of the current allocations, and that's something that the city continues to commit to. In terms of the draft local planning scheme that's before council tonight, the city is proposing to maintain agriculture as a major industry within the city and to ensure food security and support the economy and provide employment. That's why agriculture is seen as being a keystone to the future land use throughout Wanneroo.
May I respond?
Thank you. Yes, you may, Mr Zagar.
Okay, well, it's contradictory to have a land zoned rural and to allow the water to be taken away from it. It just doesn't make sense. It makes more sense to rezone the land containing the 10% of the water that DWER requires and for the remaining farms to retain 100% of the water. This is vitally important for the future of agriculture because the bank's equity that you are seeking to grow and expand your business is secured against your water licence. In many cases, that's more important than your land holding. So by allowing water insecurity, you will erode the foundation of agriculture and agriculture security. It's a contradiction to say we're going to keep the land zone rural but take the water away.
Thank you, Mr Zagar. Mr Piggott, have we contacted the state government and asked them about the possibility of this rezoning, and they've come back and said that they want it, one department said they wanted it kept as rural resource and another department wants to take the waterway from away. Is that correct? There's a bit of a conflict between the two state government departments. Mr Van Hayden, do you have the response to that? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. In terms of the potential subdivision in the area, we have the sub-regional framework, which is the state government's planning framework for Wanneroo and Dundebar. So in terms of that, Mr. Zygas referred to the 2017 document, or 2007 document. That's been replaced by the sub-regional framework, and the sub-regional framework, there's no provision for subdivision. It doesn't support subdivision and fragmentation of rural land because exactly for the reasons mentioned, you need larger land holdings in order to make agriculture productive. So that document from the state government doesn't support that, and the local planning strategy is required to comply with the state government framework. So essentially the strategy will implement that sub-regional framework, and because that doesn't entertain subdivision, the strategy is in line with that and does not recommend subdivision.
Thank you. If just a suggestion that maybe Mr Zagar and planning managers can get together and have further discussion about this. I know you've had meetings with Mr Zagar before, but you know, we're between a rock and a hard place with this, I think, but we're happy to listen.
All we ask for, I mean, the state government is all, sorry, may I respond? All we're asking for is the city to fight both fronts. They are fighting to retain the water licence against the state government's stated intention to cut the water licences. Well, not intention, they actually said they're going to do it. So why not also fight against the state government's intention not to rezone the area? Why not fight on both fronts, have two options in the fire?
Thank you, Mr Zagar. Mr Van Hayden, do you want to respond to that?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mayor. Notwithstanding the fact that the state planning framework doesn't support subdivision in the area, administration has investigated that potential subdivision in North Wanneroo as part of the local planning strategy preparation. So as part of that, we looked at all the constraints in the area. So there's a number of constraints like wetland buffers, bushfire-prone areas, basic raw materials, which are essentially state government doesn't allow any subdivision on land that's subject to basic raw materials. So after we've looked at all the constraints in the area, we couldn't actually find a dedicated area which could potentially be subdivided. Our investigation has resulted in, essentially it would result in ad hoc subdivision across the whole area, which will then negatively impact on the agricultural sector. So the agricultural sector, as you know, is very important for us, for the economy and for jobs and for food production. And allowing subdivision ad hoc everywhere there will actually impact on both the smaller land holdings as well as the larger ones. But what we are proposing as administration as part of the strategy is to look at the current landscape enhancement zone, which is covers the majority of the smaller land holdings. So we're looking at developing that as an agri-tourism precinct similar to Swan Valley. As part of that, we will be proposing expansion of land uses, so allowing things like accommodation and art galleries and restaurants there to support those landowners, and we believe that that will compensate somewhat for the 10% reduction. In the meantime, as the director indicated, the city is continuing advocating with the state government for exemptions of the 10%. So that is happening. We also consulted with the landowners. We had an extensive survey. And through that survey, 75% of the landowners support the city's advocacy to state government in terms of water licenses. Also, as part of that survey, it was with landowners that have no current water licenses, only 7% of those landowners supported subdivision. I think I'll leave it at that, but we're happy to meet with Mr. Zygar. Also, I just want to conclude by saying that this is only for council's consent to advertise. I would invite Mr. Zygar to make a submission as part of the advertising process, and council can consider that submission with all the other submissions as part of the final consideration by council.
Thank you, Mr. Van Hayden, and thank you, Mr. Zagar. Thank you for your deputation. We'll move on now to we're going to go straight to confidential. If there's any declarations of interest by council members, including the nature and extent of which the interests are to be made at the commencement of each item to which the interest relates, and declarations of interest forms are to be completed and handed to the Chief Executive Officer. So we're now going to 8.1 confidential. So if the staff can Okay, we'll now move into our reports, and we start with planning and sustainability. Mr Pickett, would you like to speak to any items on the agenda? And Mr Van Halen?
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. Planning and Sustainability has 2 reports on the Council members' briefing session agenda tonight. The first report is from Strategic Land Use Planning and Environment on the draft City of Wanneroo Local Planning Strategy. The purpose of the report is to consider the draft City of Wanneroo LPS for submission to the West Australian Planning Commission for consent to advertise. The draft local planning scheme has been prepared in line with the high-level strategic directions set by council members over the past 18 months. Manager Strategic Land Use Planning and Environment, Emile Van Heiningen, is attending the briefing session tonight to answer any questions from council members. The second report is from Approval Services on the proposed amendment to Local Planning Policy 419, Medium Density Housing Standards, to address concerns regarding vehicle parking obstructing pedestrian footpaths in medium-density residential developments. Manager Approval Services Greg Bowering is present to answer any questions from council members on this report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have any questions on 4.1? Yes, Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Mayor. I sent this question through in advance. I note that there are 43 mentions of the suburb of Girraween as a significant planning area in the strategy, and I think that's important because it demonstrates that established areas are just as significant for planning. It mentions the creation of a district centre and also the value of the Girraween hub complex and the expectation to upgrade ageing infrastructure. So can administration please comment on the significance of this particular area in terms of its relationship with the strategy?
Thank you, Mr Van Hayden.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you for the question. So, yeah, you're right, Councillor. The Girraween is an important area for change. It's basically, as you know, one of the closest areas of Wanneroo to the CBD and an established area. So we've identified that as one of the 6 planning areas in the strategy. So these planning areas are the areas that will be subject to major change through the life of the local planning strategy. So you can refer in the strategy to pages 68 and 69 that outlines the proposals for Girraween. So again, as you said, the particular focus would be the redevelopment of the New Park Centre, which is a district centre in the hierarchy of centres in the city. So as a district centre, it functions at the moment just as a shopping centre. So the intent is to redevelop that centre to become a real town centre, such as you get in Wanneroo Town Centre, where there's more than one use. There's residential, there's activity on the street. So the main objective would be to transform the centre from a shopping centre to an activity centre. Also, as part of that, the strategy proposes high-density residential within that centre, but also in close proximity to the centre. And that also includes along Wanneroo Road and along Marangaroo Road, or Marangaroo Drive, excuse the pronunciation. And administration is also working on the Girraween Hub Master Plan at the moment to deal with, as a separate project. It's not a land use planning project, but the city administration is also working on that. So, yeah, so that's one of our main focus areas for the strategy for the reasons outlined. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Van Haywen. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Coetzee.
Can you hear me? Yes. Sorry. I just would like to foreshadow an additional recommendation for next week.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions on this item? Yes, Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is, or rather I have a few questions, but the first question is, reading the report, I note that we look at bicycle lanes, we're looking at pedestrian precincts, we're looking at rail, but we don't seem to have, for the next 50 years, we have nothing in there that constitutes a light rail or a tram or some sort of alternative transport which links things to the stations. There's, if people have to get from Girraween to Alkimos, how is that going to be done? And if you need to get to Swan, how does that get done? We're only going to have limited movement with our railway line, and that's if we get the railway line. So what are we going to do in the interim to move people without utilising cars?
Thank you, Mr Van Haven.
Through you, Mayor. So the strategy, if council members can remember, we brought the local plan, we brought the transport strategy to you a few years ago. So the transport strategy is the highest level transport planning document for the city, and that plan has been incorporated into the local planning strategy. The main objective of that is to make sure that we balance the use of the private car with all other forms of transport, so pedestrians, cycling, public transport, and that also that we change the structure of the city to such an extent that it's easier for people to use those alternative methods of transport. So that's reflected in the transport section of this strategy. In terms of light rail, in the East Wanneroo area, there is a light rail, there is a transport corridor identified, but that would be post 2050, so it's outside of the life of this. But we do mention that as the framework for the future as part of this strategy. Also, a key focus of the strategy would be to make sure that we focus on the development of the station precincts as part of the Metronet stations at Alkimos, Eglinton and Yanship. That would be the main focus point, to making sure that we increase the density of development there so that people can live close to public transport. And then lastly, we also identify transport corridors. So one of them is in Girraween, near Wanneroo Road. So that would be identified as exactly increasing the density, as I mentioned previously, so that public transport is more viable there. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Van Hannigan. Is there any other? Yes, Councillor Huntley.
Can you define what you mean by public transport then, if it's going to be an alternative to the train?
Mr Van Hannigan.
Through you, Mayor. So public transport is train, light rail, as you mentioned, bus. Usually in the short term, the light rail is not viable, but if we identify a transport corridor, for instance, between the future district centre in East Wanneroo, linking that with the Wanneroo town centre, that's been identified as a transport corridor. In the early years, that probably would just be buses, but that could potentially be expanded to light rail in the future. So it's just that the urban environment needs to be mature enough so that there's enough people living close to the public transport to justify the improvements in public transport in terms of the more expensive pieces of infrastructure like light rail.
Thank you, Mr Van Hannigan.
Can
Do you
I
have another question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Could I then clarify that in fact the report does include a form of light transport, even though it doesn't say it? It is still going to investigate the opportunity if it arises.
Mr Van Hannigan.
Through you, Mayor. Yes, it does talk about it. It does talk about transport corridors, and that could mean anything, from a bus through to a rail. I just probably would just mention also that we'll be doing a transport plan, which is one level down from the transport strategy, and the transport plan will really focus more on specific projects. So that is something that we will be looking at in the next few years.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam
Councillor
Mayor.
Hunt.
Okay, the next question is obviously I look at our environment section, and in there I do notice that in the whole document, in fact, you talk about verge gardens And I think if you look at page 41, it actually is quite confusing as to what that actually means. So the city will investigate, reclassify a number of conservation categories, resource enhanced wetland to more appropriate reserves to ensure the ongoing protection and management. Existing local water management strategies include the use of Wanneroo will continue to be with, oh sorry, that was the water. Where is my wildlife? 42. Here, Verge Gardens. Verge Gardens increase the city urban forest, play a key role in reducing heat islands, increase biodiversity by providing ecological linkages and shelter for fauna, which is fantastic because that, to me, that's creating a corridor. Hopefully it will link. And shelter for facilitate food production and increase community interaction. Food security is an important factor to be considered and is no longer a theoretic consideration, as seen recently by the supply chain issues caused by COVID and the floods. And then you say, to promote urban agriculture and food production due to the desired equity in food supply, the benefits of fresh to lower emissions, but you actually talk about using these as city verges for urban agricultural will be considered through the local planning framework. So verges, you say verge gardens, could you actually define what that means?
Mr Van Haninen.
Through you, Mayor. So veg, that's been included as a action is to look into potentially using verges for increasing the urban forest. So for instance, including provisions in the new planning scheme number 3 to require trees to be planted as properties are subdivided. So then it becomes a legal requirement. But it also includes looking at our policies to see how we can facilitate food production on verges. If you think about the verges in the city, it's a massive amount of land that could potentially be used to promote biodiversity and food production, as well as addressing the heat islands. So that's really what was meant with that action, but that is to investigate that further. There's obviously constraints associated with that, making sure that it doesn't interfere with access to properties, to impact on infrastructure and things like that, but that would be part of the investigation of that.
So would this
Thank you,
be...
Mr Van Hanningen. You have another question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So would this be for, say, somebody buys the home, they've got a verge out front, and they can grow vegetables in it or whatever for personal use? Or is this something that the city's going to adopt to actually increase its food production, and people will, their verges will be used for, you know, apples or fruits or whatever, because we're obviously looking at urban canopies as well. So how, can you just explain how this would work?
Mr Van Hanenen.
Through you, Mayor. So in the first instance, it's not the city undertaking that. It is ensuring that the local planning framework and land use planning can support that, so taking away any limitations to that, so allowing people to be able to do that, specify certain parameters of that. Yeah, so looking at all of those different aspects to it, but that could be food production, or it could just be planting of street trees, and nobody would be obliged to do it. It's just making it easier for people to do it if they so choose to do it.
Thank you, Mr Van Hanenen. You have another question,
Yeah.
do you, Councillor Huntley?
So if I could clarify, that is like the proposal really for the public to actually have their own verges, to utilise those verges, and to have things where certain areas could eat their way around their borough. They can have communities who grow and vegetate those verges. Is that correct?
Mr Van Hanenen.
That's correct, yes, but the verges will be not owned by landowners. It's just making it easier for them to do that. So there's a number of local governments, like the City of Bayswater, like City of Vincent, that's leaders in this field, and there's certain parameters. Okay, so you can't grow certain plants higher than a certain length, making sure there's visibility, making sure that it doesn't impact on pedestrian movements and things like that. But it is a long-term initiative to look at a whole new approach in terms of how do we actually look at the urban environment and how can we make it more sustainable. So it will be a journey.
Thank you, Mr Van Heynen. Are there any other questions on this item? If there are no more questions on this item, I move to item 4.2. Any questions to Mr Bowring? Yes, Councillor White. Smith. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I noticed on page 13 with consultation, there isn't listed social media, and I was just wondering why that wasn't listed.
Mr Bowring.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. The consultation processes are regulated so that we are using all of the ones that are provided. While we use social media from time to time to notify people about things, and we can use it to notify people, go to our website and engage, and we do that. We just haven't specified that as one of the regulated means of consultation.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. Any other questions on this item? Yes, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I noted on page 14, it mentioned that the matter has not been addressed in the state planning policy framework in terms of the setbacks for garages. And I was just wondering, I guess that was just surprising to me that they didn't include that, and if anyone can expand on that, why they didn't include it.
Mr Bowring.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. The residential medium density codes have been a number of years in the making by the state government. In fact, it was intended to be the first part of the review of the R codes. It ended up being the last part of the review of the R codes. For a long time, we've been using the residential medium density codes operational policy. That has had a few unintended consequences, largely because there was a number of policies around varying the codes to make it simpler to obtain development approval on smaller, as lots got smaller. So the RMD codes was a stopgap policy measure, which councils implemented through their own local planning policies. We had identified this issue through the policy, with this policy in terms of the garage setbacks, as people had tried to park and continued to park on verges. Our expectation was that the Commission would address that through the medium density codes. That hasn't been the case, and in fact they've baked in the RMD policy for another 2 to 2.5 years as a transition period for existing lots. So we had hoped that basically to be at a point where we could just repeal the RMD codes and or local planning policy 4.19 at this stage, but that's not going to be the case. So this is a stopgap measure just to address this specific issue.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. Would you agree that this amendment brings about common sense so that we don't have to end up fining nurses in their cars outside houses when they're parked over a pedestrian walkway?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, it is nice when common sense and planning coincide.
Thank you. I'll move on to assets now. Mr Gee. Mr G, would you like to commence?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, assets have 3 reports before council members this evening. I'm not actually planning on presenting any of the reports, but happy to take questions. I do, however, note that item 4.4 and 4.5, there are confidential attachments, and should there be questions relating to those matters, we'd need to take those behind closed doors due to the commercially sensitive nature of those attachments.
Thank you, Mr G. Do I have any questions on item 4.3? No questions on item 4.3. Item 4.4. Any questions on item 4.4? Yes, councillor Smith. Is it about the confidential attachment or not? Okay.
Sorry, I didn't have the page numbers. I noticed that it had a low risk rating attached to it. However, previously it described it as an unacceptable level of risk if we didn't recommit to the contract. That just seemed a bit of a contradiction to me. I was wondering if somebody could expand on that, please.
Mr G? Mr Singh is happy to speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Thank you, Mayor. I think based on the risk assessment, what we've done is on that option to extend, after putting the mitigation measures in place, the rating becomes low.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this item? Yes, councillor Smith.
Thank you. I noted and was a little bit concerned about the comments about the quality of servicing not meeting specification. And it seems to be that...
Councillor Smith, we need to be careful here because that might be part of the confidential attachment.
I will double check, sorry.
So I might be able to assist there. I believe
Mr G, I think what we'll do just for security is we'll go behind closed confidential for this, thank you, just if we're going to discuss it further. Okay, so we're now going to community in place. Ms Terrelink. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. There are 3 items this evening from Community in Place, and I propose to briefly introduce item 4.6 and 4.7. So in relation to 4.6, as you would note in the report, generally with a asset replacement, as this is the case, that the BMX track has been in place since the early 1990s, we would normally only do an informed level of consultation by writing to local residents to let them know of the works that were going to be undertaken. However, given the petition that we have received and the issues that have been raised, the intention is to do a broader consultation and actually seek community input into the project, and then the intention would be to bring that consultation feedback back to Council for further consideration. I do anticipate that there are probably some design issues that could be implemented as part of the project if it was to progress. That could deal with some of the issues raised by residents. However, the first step that administration is proposing is that we do a broader level of consultation with the surrounding residents to understand what the views are more broadly.
Thank you, Ms Terrelink. Do we have any questions on this item? Yes, Councillor Rowe.
Thanks, Mayor. Just 2 questions from me. I'll ask them individually. The petition itself requested an opportunity for I think it was a meeting with council. It stated in there. I imagine that happened through the deputation and the fact that it's considered on the council agenda. But was there any opportunity where the staff, the city's administration, attended a site visit and were able to either experience the BMX track itself or meet with residents on site?
Through you, Mayor, I think the petition actually came in when we had already, if you like, dismantled the BMX track as a result of it becoming unserviceable. So that certainly hasn't been an option. But one of the, just taking on that point, one of the things we can do as part of the consultation is actually arrange an on-site consultation as part of the broader consultation.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Councillor Rowe.
And the second question was just something that was raised in the deputation, that they mentioned conversations regularly with ranger services, and I don't know if the deputation actually indicated whether police had been contacted and if they'd attended the site in response to alleged disorderly behaviour. So, Ms Terrelink, to the city's knowledge, have police attended the site, and has any feedback been provided either to the administration directly or to the Community Safety Working Group in relation to this particular issue?
Ms Terrelink.
Through you, Mayor, as far as I'm aware, this hasn't come to the attention of the Community Safety Working Group, and we do, as Councillor Rowe would be aware, we do get regular updates from the local police at that working group, and as far as I'm aware, we haven't had that particular issue raised.
Thank you, Ms Terrelink. Are there any other questions? Councillor Herridge.
Thanks, Mayor. I've got a couple, if you all bear with me. I was wondering whether we can go, the space looks very familiar to what we actually originally had before we transformed our skate park down at Lansdale. So I can kind of sympathise a little with residents with what they're going through. Can we maybe make the radius a little bit larger for consult? Because I know we're only doing the 400 metres. It might be nicer to go to 600 just to encapsulate a few more, because it does look like it's quite all close together.
Ms Terrelink.
Yes, through you, Mayor. Certainly our community engagement policy is flexible in that we can expand the area of consultation if Council would like us to do so.
Thank you. Councillor Herridge.
Thank you. The engagement that we'll be going out for, we're going to be asking a bit more of a broader scope to see if people want it like for like, or whether they do want it redeveloped to a skate park per se, to try and mitigate with the issues that they've already got with dust and noise, perhaps?
Ms Terrelink.
Through you, Mayor, I understand that the original concept was around replacing like for like, so it was in regard to replacing a BMX track with another BMX track. We can, however, provide the opportunity through the consultation to engage residents to see if there's other alternatives they would like to have considered as part of the project.
Ms Terrelling, I've just got a question. Would another skate park be in our current budget at the moment?
Through you, Mayor, as far as I'm aware, no, there is no further skate park proposed at this point in time. And given that this is budgeted under asset renewal, I would say it's budgeted on the basis of a replacement like-for-like facility.
And that would be a lot cheaper than the cost of a skate park, is that correct?
Through you, Mayor, generally speaking, yes, that would be the case.
So depending on what the community says, it might be an advocacy project.
Through you, Mayor, that's certainly a possibility.
Councillor Herridge.
Thank you. Just one more. Noting in the report that there was savings made and an allocated allowance was considered for it to be brought through to 22-23. One, do we have those savings still that we can actually put through into the plan? And can we ensure this project does get a little bit of a speed on, knowing that it's already had a little bit of a history, so it doesn't get left for councillors or for council to keep on top of mind?
Ms Terrelling.
Through you, Mayor, it is part of a recurring program, I understand, which does mean that the recurring program will continue into 23-24, and there is capacity to look at whether those funds can be transferred if they're capital.
Thank you, Ms Terrelling. Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is, at the moment, the area does look very deficient of any flora in there. There's very few trees. There's just obviously a large space. By the looks of from the deputation tonight, that bikes and quads are actually going on there and using that, which is stirring up the dust. If these residents decide that the BMX track is unwelcome, and we decide perhaps not to put a BMX track back in there, could this be turned into a nature park? Could we actually put trees in here to actually stop the bikes and allow more walkers or dogs and just neighbourhood friendly meeting spots rather than just a big blank square in the middle?
Ms Terrelling.
Yes, through you, Mayor, I think if we make the consultation flexible enough to look at other options, if the BMX track is not supported, we could certainly capture that as part of the consultation feedback that will come through to Council for consideration.
Thank you, Ms Terrelling. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor. The school PE groups that are coming during the day, could we also ensure that we find out what schools they are, why they're using them, and also include them in the consultation?
Through you, Mayor, yes, we can do that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one from me, and it's probably one the Director can take on notice for next week. Just in regards to youth facilities in that corridor and the distance in relation to that park, if we could have some more information in terms of what alternative areas or activities are for youth in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Terrelling.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll take that on notice and provide that in the report for next week.
Any other questions on this item? There are no more questions on this item. We go to the next item. Ms Terrelling, would you like to speak to item 4.7?
Thank you, Mayor. As per Council's recommendation from December 2022 to progress to detailed design for the Alkimos Aquatic and Recreation Centre, we have undertaken tender processes now for the detailed design and also for the cost planner services, which is a item 4.8. We've had a good response in terms of the lead architect, if you like, for the preparation of the detailed design for this project, and this report is recommending the appointment of the lead architect so that we can commence with the detailed design, subject to the further report that's being considered in the confidential section about the land acquisition.
Thank you, Ms Terrelink. Any questions on this item? If there are no questions on this item, we go to item 4.8. Thank you, Ms Terrelink.
Thank you, Mayor. I wasn't proposing to introduce this item, just happy to take questions. Thank you.
Any questions on item 4.8? There are no questions on item 4.8. We go to corporate strategy and performance. Ms Jennings. Ms Jennings, would you like to speak any of the items on your part of the agenda tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. They're both February financial reports, so happy to take questions.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. On page 78, I noticed that despite in the overall comments on the year to date that rates are higher, revenue from rates, but in the February operating revenue, the comment was mainly due to low revenue from rates, and the variance is quite high there. So I was just wanting more information on that, please.
Thank you. Ms Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess the estimate that we had for February in this case didn't actually match what came in, so, and that can happen sometimes depending on when people do actually pay their rates. So obviously February was different from what we estimated in the first place, but as you've noted, year to date is higher.
Any other questions on this item? Yes, Councillor Smith.
Probably just following on from that one, so clarifying, could that be because people have paid rates earlier, so they didn't need to pay them in February?
Ms Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, I can investigate further, but that's one possibility.
Do I have any other questions on item 4.9? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. On page 80, I noticed the TPS and DCP, there's quite large variance in there as well, and I was wondering if there could be more information regarding why that is.
Ms Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sideways, unfortunately, so it's a bit hard to read on the screen. I was being smart here, but I'll have a look at what's been happening there. It may be that we haven't spent what we thought we would spend this year because there were some things planned to spend from the DCP. So I can investigate that and get back to you.
Thank you. Any other questions on item 4.9? There are no more. Oh, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Could it potentially relate to on page 89 when it's talking about unfavourable variance due to timing difference of contributions from developers? Could you explain to me what parameters developers do have for making their contributions and help explain that to me a little bit more, please?
Ms Jennings.
So the budget for this particular month was 0, so we've actually, the expenses rather, the budget was 0 and we've expended 319,000. So there's a public open space that's development has been in different time than what we expected. So obviously the money has gone out for that. So, and that can sometimes happen when we're budgeting over a 12-month period that perhaps they haven't quite lined up with us.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. On page 84, under other revenue, I just noticed in the graph that the budget estimates are significantly larger than previous months. And from the notes, I didn't see a relevant explanation for that. So I was just wondering what the explanation was for that one.
Ms Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is actually showing some more money coming in from the Neerabup project that hadn't been before. So again, I'll double check that for you, but it was due to come in at a certain point. So,
Thank you, Ms Jennings. Any other questions on item 4.9? Councillor Smith.
Thank you. On page 97, is this a different one? I noticed that Dordak is categorised as amber, and I was wondering if that was just to the volatility of cost of suppliers in the market at the moment, considering everything else is green.
Ms Jennings. Ms Terrelink can respond to that, I think.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The reason for that would be around the budget, as Councillor Smith has indicated. So certainly when we get further progressed in the detailed design, we'll have a better understanding of how the budget relates to the design.
Thank you, Ms Terrelink. Do we have any other questions on item 4.9? If not, we will move to item 4.10. Do we have any questions on item 4.10? Councillor Wright.
Sorry, Mayor, I'm unable to have access to my email and I'm working with IT to get the issue resolved, but I'm happy for the Director to take these two on notice. On page 113, it's 14195, oars across the waters. It just looked like a bit of a unusual one. Happy for just information to be provided to us on that one. And on page 117, just a breakdown of the election costs, because it's good to compare between the past elections as well to see how much these are increasing, but to also know how much we need to budget and what the breakdown is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Take that on notice.
sorry, Mayor, I can answer the first question.
Yep.
So that was, sorry, if you can repeat the number of, I got the page, but the... there it is.
14195.
Yeah. So thank you. Through the chair, that is a mediation group. So that's to do with staff mediations. And I'll follow up on the election. Which page was that, please?
117, 14267.
I'll take that one on notice. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Jennings. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Wright. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question, newbie question. When it's got rates refund, are they predominantly due to applications for hardship? Thank you.
Through the chair, they're generally for things that might be like someone sold a property, and so some of their rates need to come back to them because they've paid for the full year. That's mainly what it's about.
Thank you, Ms Jennings. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. On page 155, the code is 28-150. Just interested to see about the Sameo plumbing supplies. There's a sink and it's a retirement gift. A retirement gift of a sink just seemed interesting to me.
Ms Jennings?
Sorry, through the chair, what was the number of the actual item, please?
28-150. Fifth one down on page 155.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll take that one on notice and just check. I can see it's in waste services, so I'll have a look at exactly what that is and get back to you, Councillor.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted clarification on what fuel issues for the city, is it just fuel, or what does fuel issues mean? So, for example, on page 136, code 14679.
Ms Jennings?
Through the chair, so that's from Viva Energy Australia Proprietary Limited. So I think maybe the Director of Assets, Acting CEO, may know what that is for, but otherwise I'll take that on notice and find out.
We'll take it on notice. It might be a spelling error too. It could be fuel issued for the city instead of issues. Yeah, Ms Smith?
Sorry, I did see that same thing. It's on the other page as well. So page 137 with a different company, 14690, fourth one down, and that's with WEX Australia, and it says fuel issues for the city. So I was just wondering, yeah, clarification on that would be great. I do have another question as well.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I noticed that we've got after hours call service, and apologies, I think that might be 136. No, it's not. Apologies, I don't have the right number correct there, but I noticed that it was for $15,000, and I was just wondering if somebody knew off the top of their head compared with previous months, is that comparative in terms of that amount for after-hours call service?
Ms Jennings?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll take that on notice. I can't remember those, so thank you.
Just, Councillor Smith, just for future reference, and all the councillors have heard this before, normally if you've got questions like this, they're emailed if they can be first, and then that gives the directors a chance to be able to have the answers for you at the meeting. So if you get a chance, that would be a big help, okay? Yes, Councillor Smith.
So I just have that number for you. So that one was 14594 on page 131.
Ms Jennings?
Yeah, through the chair, that's our after-hours call for the Customer Relationship Centre. I'm pretty sure that's a fairly set price because we would have tendered for that, so it would be pretty much similar very much each month.
Thank you, Ms Jennings. Are there any other questions on this item? Councillor Rowe.
It's more just a correction. I was looking through it on page 149. The reference number is 27-37, referring to a hospitality expense, and my name's listed there. I wasn't present at that, so I don't know why, given that I wasn't at the Walga convention. So just for the purpose of the record being accurate, if my name could be removed.
I think I know the councillor that was there, so I might talk with you offline. I know Councillor Wright wasn't there. I think I know the councillor that was there. Councillor Rowe wasn't there, sorry. I know the councillor that was there. All right, are there any more questions on the warrant of payments? Okay, we move on. Chief Executive 411, Central West Ward vacancy. Mr Singh, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And this report outlines the process for the vacancy in Central Ward for the council election. Since the completion of this report, we have received the advice from WAEC regarding the, we requested an approval that can the position be kept vacant, so that is possible. So we'll include that letter in the report for next week, and we're happy to answer any questions on this item.
Do we have any questions on this item? If there are no questions on this item, we now go to confidential items, and so we will turn off the online and go to confidential Oh, dear me. I'm ready to go home. I'm ready to go home. We've now finished our confidential items and we go to item 9, which is the date of the next meeting. The next ordinary council meeting has been scheduled for 6 p.m. on Tuesday the 18th of April to be held at Council Chamber Civic Centre, 23 Dundebar Road, Wanneroo. Item 10, closure. Thank you for your attendance and I now declare the briefing session closed at 8:26 p.m. Thank you everyone.